Jasmine Crockett was no stranger to the spotlight. A bold and outspoken politician, she had made a name for herself by standing up for what she believed in, even when it wasn't popular. Her speeches were fiery, her arguments sharp, and her presence commanded attention. But little did anyone know, including Jasmine herself, that one single moment on live television would change everything, for better or worse. It all started on a crisp Tuesday morning. Jasmine woke up early, as she always did, ready to tackle the day ahead. She had been invited to appear on a popular news show alongside Marjorie Greene, a controversial figure known for her strong opinions and unfiltered remarks. The two women had crossed paths before, but this time felt different. As Jasmine got dressed, she couldn't shake off a strange feeling in the pit of her stomach. Something about today didn't sit right with her. When she arrived at the studio, the energy was electric. Cameras were set up, lights blindingly bright, and the crew buzzed around making last-minute adjustments. Jasmine greeted the host and exchanged polite nods with Marjorie. There was an awkward tension between them, the kind you feel when two people are about to clash but haven't yet said a word. Still, Jasmine pushed the thought aside. She reminded herself why she was here, to talk about issues that mattered to her community and to stand firm in her beliefs. The show began smoothly enough. The host introduced both guests and they dove into the usual topics: policies, current events, and their differing views on how to solve America's biggest challenges. For the first few minutes, it seemed like any other political debate. Jasmine spoke passionately about justice reform and economic equality, while Marjorie countered with her own perspective. Back and forth they went, each trying to outshine the other, but then something shifted. Midway through the discussion, Marjorie leaned forward in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly. She interrupted Jasmine mid-sentence, holding up a folder, labeled Evidence. The room went eerily quiet. Even the host paused, unsure of what was coming next. With a smirk that sent chills down Jasmine's spine, Marjorie said, "I think it's time we talked about some things you've tried so hard to hide, Congresswoman Crockett." Jasmine froze. Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at the folder in Marjorie's hands. What could it possibly contain? She had nothing to hide, or at least, that's what she told herself. But deep down, she knew that everyone has skeletons in their closet, things they'd rather keep buried. And now, it seemed, Marjorie was determined to drag those secrets into the light. Without missing a beat, Marjorie launched into her accusations. She claimed that Jasmine had misused campaign funds, using donor money for personal luxuries like vacations and expensive clothes. She cited specific dates and amounts, reading them aloud for the entire audience to hear. The words hit Jasmine, like a punch to the gut. She felt her face flush with heat, partly from embarrassment and partly from anger. How dare Marjorie accuse her of such dishonesty without proof? Jasmine tried to stay calm. She took a deep breath and responded firmly, denying every allegation. "These claims are baseless," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "My finances have been audited multiple times and everything is above board." But Marjorie wasn't done. She pressed further, bringing up another accusation that Jasmine had manipulated evidence in a legal case years ago, long before she entered politics. This was a low blow, and Jasmine knew it. As the accusations piled on, Jasmine struggled to keep her composure. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that these claims were twisted versions of the truth, or outright lies, but the words caught in her throat. The cameras captured every flicker of emotion on her face: shock, disbelief, frustration. Meanwhile, Marjorie looked triumphant, as if she had finally cornered her opponent. The tension in the room was palpable. The host tried to intervene, asking both women to stick to the facts and avoid personal attacks. But it was too late. The conversation had spiraled out of control, and there was no turning back. Viewers at home watched in stunned silence, unsure of who to believe. Some sympathized with Jasmine, thinking she was being unfairly targeted. Others sided with Marjorie, eager to see what dirt she might uncover next. For Jasmine, the experience was surreal. One moment she was discussing policy reforms. The next, She was fighting for her reputation on national television. It was exhausting, humiliating and infuriating all at once. Yet, amidst the chaos, a part of her refused to back down. She reminded herself of why she stepped into politics in the first place, to fight for justice, to give a voice to those who couldn't speak for themselves. If she let Marjorie win this battle, what message would that send? As the segment drew to a close, the damage had already been done. Social media lit up with reactions, memes, and heated debates. Clips of the confrontation spread like wildfire, turning Jasmine's name into a trending topic. Supporters rallied behind her, flooding her social media accounts with messages of encouragement. Critics, however, seized the opportunity to question her integrity, calling her out for losing her cool under pressure. That night, Jasmine sat alone in her apartment, replaying the events of the day in her mind. She felt drained, overwhelmed by the weight of what had happened. But even in her darkest moments, she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Marjorie had thrown the first punch, and now it was Jasmine's turn to fight back. Whatever it took, she was ready to clear her name and prove that she wasn't the person Marjorie portrayed her to be. Little did Jasmine know, this was only the beginning of a much bigger battle, one that would test her strength, resilience, and determination in ways she never imagined. The days following the explosive live TV showdown were a blur for Jasmine. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, calls, emails, and notifications poured in nonstop. Supporters sent messages of encouragement, telling her to stay strong and not let the accusations break her spirit. But alongside the uplifting words came a flood of criticism. Social media was ablaze with memes mocking her reaction, trolls questioning her integrity, and armchair critics dissecting every word she had said during that heated exchange. It felt like the entire world was watching, waiting to see how she would respond next. Jasmine knew she couldn't ignore what had happened. The allegations weren't just personal attacks. They struck at the heart of her career and everything she stood for. If left unchecked, they could tarnish not only her reputation but also the causes she fought so hard to champion. She spent hours locked in her office with her closest advisors, going over every detail of Marjorie's claims. Together, they pored through financial records, legal documents, and old case files, determined to find proof that would debunk the accusations once and for all. But as much as she tried to focus on the facts, the emotional toll weighed heavily on her. Late at night, when the noise of the day finally quieted down, Jasmine found herself replaying the confrontation over and over in her mind. Why had Marjorie targeted her? Was it purely political, or was there something deeper driving this vendetta? And more importantly, how could she turn this situation around without stooping to the same level? One evening, after another grueling day of meetings and strategy sessions, Jasmine sat alone in her living room. Her dog curled up beside her, offering silent comfort as she stared blankly at the wall. She thought about the people who looked up to her, the families counting on her to fight for better schools, the workers hoping for fair wages, the communities depending on her voice to be heard in places where theirs often went ignored. These were the people she owed her strength to, not the critics or the trolls trying to tear her down. With renewed determination, Jasmine decided it was time to take control of the narrative. Sitting at her kitchen table late into the night, she drafted a heartfelt statement addressing the public. In it, she didn't shy away from acknowledging the controversy, but instead leaned into transparency. "I am human," she wrote. "And like any human, I've made mistakes, but I can assure you the claims being made against me are false. My team and I are working tirelessly to provide evidence that proves my innocence. Until then, I ask for your patience and trust." The statement went viral almost instantly. People admired her honesty and vulnerability, qualities that resonated deeply in a time when politics often felt cold and calculated. Many saw her response as refreshingly real, a stark contrast to the polished denials politicians usually issued when under fire. For the first time since the scandal broke, Jasmine began to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could win back the narrative. However, Marjorie wasn't done yet. Emboldened by the attention her accusations had garnered, she doubled down, appearing on multiple talk shows to defend her claims. Each interview brought new twists, subtle insinuations, and thinly veiled jabs aimed directly at Jasmine. It was clear that Marjorie wasn't going to back down anytime soon. Instead of shrinking away, Jasmine realized she needed to go on the offensive, not with anger, but with undeniable proof. Her team worked around the clock, combing through years' worth of records to build an airtight defense. They uncovered inconsistencies in Marjorie's timeline of events, pointing out discrepancies in dates and amounts mentioned in the alleged misuse of funds. One particularly glaring error stood out. A transaction Marjorie claimed took place during a month when Jasmine had been hospitalized for surgery. How could she have possibly made that purchase if she'd been bedridden? Armed with these findings, Jasmine prepared to make her next move. She called a press conference, inviting journalists, supporters, and even some of her harshest critics to attend. The room buzzed with anticipation as she stepped up to the podium, her posture confident despite the weight of the moment. Without hesitation, she laid out the evidence piece by piece, dismantling Marjorie's accusations with calm precision. She showed bank statements, medical records, and sworn affidavits from witnesses who confirmed her whereabouts during key periods, mentioned in the claims. As she spoke, the atmosphere shifted. Doubts that had lingered in the air began to dissolve, replaced by murmurs of disbelief, not at Jasmine, but at the flimsy nature of Marjorie's allegations. By the end of the presentation, even some of Jasmine's skeptics walked away convinced that the charges against her were baseless. The tide was turning, slowly but surely, yet while the evidence seemed to vindicate her, Jasmine knew this victory came at a cost. The stress of the ordeal had taken its toll on her physically and emotionally. She hadn't slept properly in weeks, her appetite had vanished, and the constant scrutiny had left her feeling exposed in ways she never imagined. Still, she refused to let it break her. If anything, the experience had taught her something valuable. Resilience isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning how to weather them. In the days that followed, public opinion continued to shift in Jasmine's favor. Talk shows invited her back, not to debate Marjorie's claims, but to discuss her journey and the lessons she had learned along the way. People admired her ability to rise above the chaos, to face adversity head-on without losing sight of who she was. Supporters rallied behind her, organizing fundraisers to help cover legal expenses stemming from the investigation. Even those who had doubted her initially admitted they respected her tenacity and grace under pressure. For Marjorie, however, the fallout was less forgiving. As Jasmine's defense gained traction, cracks began to show in her own story. Questions arose about the sources of her information and whether she had acted responsibly before making such serious accusations. Critics accused her of grandstanding, using sensationalism to boost her profile rather than seeking genuine accountability. Though she attempted to deflect blame, calling the backlash politically motivated, the damage to her credibility was undeniable. Through it all, Jasmine remained focused on the bigger picture. This wasn't just about clearing her name, it was about setting an example. She wanted to show others that no matter how tough things got, it was possible to stand firm in your truth without resorting to mudslinging or fear-mongering. That message resonated far beyond the confines of the scandal, inspiring countless people to believe in the power of perseverance and authenticity. As the dust began to settle, Jasmine allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought about the whirlwind of emotions she'd experienced, from shock and anger to frustration and triumph. She realized that while the ordeal had tested her in unimaginable ways, it had also revealed her strength. She emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to continue fighting for the causes she cared about. This chapter of her life may have been chaotic and painful, but it had also been transformative. And though she knew challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain: Jasmine Crockett was ready to face them, with courage, conviction, and an unshakable belief in doing what was right. The weeks that followed felt like a roller coaster for Jasmine. On one hand, she was relieved to see the tide turning in her favor. The evidence she presented during the press conference had struck a chord with many people, and public opinion seemed to be shifting back toward her side. Supporters rallied harder than ever. organizing fundraisers, sharing positive stories about her work, and flooding social media with messages of encouragement. But on the other hand, the emotional toll of the ordeal lingered. It wasn't just the accusations. It was the constant scrutiny, the feeling of being under a microscope 24/7, and the weight of knowing that every move she made could either help or hurt her reputation. Jasmine tried to keep her focus on the bigger picture. She reminded herself daily why she had entered politics in the first place, to make a difference. Whether it was advocating for justice reform, pushing for economic equality, or amplifying marginalized voices, her mission had always been clear. This scandal, as painful as it was, couldn't derail her from that purpose. Still, staying grounded wasn't easy when the world seemed determined to dissect her every word and action. One morning, as she sat at her desk reviewing notes for an upcoming speech, her phone buzzed incessantly. A notification popped up. A new interview clip of Marjorie had surfaced online. In it, Marjorie dismissed Jasmine's evidence as manufactured and accused her of playing victim to gain sympathy. Watching the clip left Jasmine fuming. After all the effort she'd put into proving her innocence, here was Marjorie doubling down, refusing to acknowledge the holes in her own story. For a moment, anger threatened to take over. But then Jasmine remembered something her grandmother used to say: "Never let someone else's fire burn you." Taking a deep breath, she closed the video and turned her attention back to her work. She realized that engaging in another round of mudslinging wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she decided to channel her energy into something productive, something that would remind everyone why they trusted her in the first place. That evening, she announced a series of town hall meetings across her district. These weren't going to be typical campaign stops filled with rehearsed speeches and vague promises. No, these would be raw, unfiltered conversations where people could ask her anything about the scandal, her policies, or even her personal life, and she would answer honestly. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people showed up to the first meeting, packing a small community center to capacity. Some attendees came armed with tough questions. Others simply wanted to hear her perspective, and a few just wanted to show their support. Jasmine stood at the front of the room, microphone in hand, ready to face whatever came her way. The first question hit hard. How do we know you're telling the truth this time? Instead of dodging it, Jasmine leaned into the discomfort. She admitted that trust was fragile and that rebuilding it wouldn't happen overnight. "I can't force anyone to believe me," she said, looking directly at the person who had asked the question. "All I can do is show up, stay transparent, and keep working for you. If that's not enough, then I'll respect your decision. But I hope you'll give me the chance to prove myself through my actions, not just my words." Her honesty resonated. By the end of the night, several skeptics approached her privately to thank her for addressing their concerns so openly. Word spread quickly about how real and relatable she had been during those town halls. Attendance grew at each subsequent event, drawing crowds far beyond what anyone expected. People appreciated seeing a politician who wasn't afraid to be vulnerable, who listened without judgment, and who treated them like equals rather than voters to be won over. But while Jasmine was making strides in reconnecting with her constituents, the media circus surrounding her feud with Marjorie showed no signs of slowing down. Late-night talk show hosts joked about their rivalry, pundits debated whose strategy was more effective, and Twitter threads dissected every interaction between the two women. It became impossible to escape the narrative that painted them as bitter enemies locked in a never-ending battle for dominance. Jasmine hated it. She didn't want to be defined by this conflict, especially since it overshadowed the issues she cared about most. Determined to change the conversation, Jasmine made a bold decision. She invited Marjorie to join her for a live, unmoderated discussion. Not on a flashy news program, but in a neutral setting where they could speak directly to the public. There would be no scripts, no interruptions, and no hidden agendas. Just two women hashing things out face to face. Her team warned her against it, fearing it might backfire, but Jasmine insisted. "If we're going to resolve this," she told them, "we need to stop hiding behind sound bites and actually talk to each other." To everyone's surprise, Marjorie accepted the invitation. Speculation ran wild about what might happen. Would sparks fly? Would tempers flare? Or would they find common ground? The anticipation built as the date of the discussion approached. When the day finally arrived, thousands tuned in to watch, eager to see whether this unusual experiment in civility would succeed or implode spectacularly. The setup was simple: a small stage with 2 chairs, a table, and a single microphone. No audience, no cameras zooming in for dramatic close-ups, just the 2 women sitting across from each other. As they began talking, it became clear that this wasn't going to be another heated argument. Jasmine started by thanking Marjorie for agreeing to the meeting, acknowledging that despite their differences, they both shared a desire to serve their country. Marjorie, visibly caught off guard by the gesture, hesitated before responding in kind. For the next hour, they discussed everything: the allegations, the fallout, the impact on their families and careers. They didn't agree on much, but they listened to each other. At one point, Jasmine admitted that the accusations had shaken her confidence, forcing her to reflect on her own vulnerabilities. Marjorie, in turn, confessed that she sometimes struggled with balancing her principles and the pressure to perform politically. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were moments of tension and awkward silences, but it was honest. When it ended, neither woman walked away convinced that the other was completely right or wrong. But something had shifted. The hostility that had defined their relationship seemed to soften, replaced by a grudging respect. Viewers flooded social media with comments praising the maturity and courage it took for both women to engage in such a raw dialogue. For the first time in months, the narrative began to shift away from conflict and toward collaboration. Jasmine returned home that night exhausted but hopeful. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust takes time, and there would always be critics waiting to pounce on any misstep. But she also knew that tonight marked a turning point, not just for her, but for the kind of leadership she wanted to embody. She didn't have to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she could choose empathy, accountability, and grace. As she lay in bed reflecting on the day's events, Jasmine allowed herself a rare moment of pride. She had faced one of the toughest challenges of her career head-on, refusing to let fear or anger dictate her actions. And though the scars of the experience would remain, they served as reminders of her resilience. Whatever came next, she was ready. Because if there was one thing this ordeal had taught her, it was that true strength lies not in avoiding storms, but in learning how to dance in the rain. The days after the live discussion between Jasmine and Marjorie felt surreal. For weeks, the country had been gripped by their feud. Every accusation, every rebuttal, every heated exchange dissected and debated endlessly. But now, something unexpected had happened. People were talking about the conversation they'd had together, not as enemies trading blows, but as 2 human beings willing to sit down and listen to each other. It was a rare moment of civility in an increasingly polarized world, and it resonated deeply with viewers who had grown tired of constant division. Jasmine woke up the morning after the meeting feeling lighter than she had in months. The weight of anger and frustration that had clung to her since the scandal began seemed to lift slightly. She knew this didn't mean everything was fixed, far from it. But for the first time, she felt like she had taken control of the narrative. Instead of letting others define her story, she had chosen to write her own chapter, one marked by honesty and vulnerability. That realization gave her a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Still, the aftermath wasn't all sunshine and roses. Critics were quick to point out that the conversation hadn't resolved any of the core issues. Some accused Jasmine of going soft, claiming she should have pressed Marjorie harder on the accusations. Others dismissed the entire event as a PR stunt designed to polish her image. Even some of her closest allies expressed concerns, worried that extending an olive branch might be seen as weakness rather than strength. But Jasmine refused to let those voices drown out the ones cheering her on. She remembered the messages flooding her inbox after the discussion, people thanking her for modeling what respectful disagreement could look like. Parents wrote to say they planned to show clips of the conversation to their kids as an example of how to handle conflict without resorting to insults or name-calling. Teachers shared stories of using the dialogue in classrooms to spark discussions about empathy and understanding. These responses reminded Jasmine why she had taken the risk in the first place. With renewed energy, Jasmine threw herself back into her work. She visited schools, community centers, and local businesses, listening to people's concerns and sharing ideas for moving forward. At each stop, she emphasized collaboration over confrontation. "We don't have to agree on everything to get things done," she often said during these visits. "What matters is finding common ground and working toward solutions that benefit everyone." Her message struck a chord, especially among younger generations eager for leaders who prioritized unity over division. Meanwhile, Marjorie seemed to retreat from the spotlight. After the live discussion, she stopped appearing on news shows and avoided commenting further on the allegations. Speculation swirled about whether she regretted agreeing to the meeting or if she simply didn't know how to respond to the shift in public perception. Whatever the reason, her silence spoke volumes. Without her constant attacks, the media frenzy surrounding Jasmine began to die down, allowing her to focus on rebuilding trust within her community. Yet, despite the progress she was making, Jasmine couldn't ignore the lingering effects of the scandal. Every day brought new reminders of what she had endured: the sideways glances from colleagues, the snide comments whispered behind closed doors, the occasional troll lurking in her mentions. Online, it was exhausting, but she refused to let it consume her. Instead, she leaned on her support system, her family, friends, and team, to keep her grounded. They reminded her that healing takes time and that setbacks were part of the process. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Jasmine stumbled across a post that stopped her in her tracks. It was written by a young woman who described herself as someone who had initially doubted Jasmine's integrity. "I thought I had her figured out," the post read. "But watching her handle this whole situation made me realize how wrong I was. She didn't shy away from tough questions or hide behind excuses. She faced everything head-on, and that's something I admire." Tears welled up in Jasmine's eyes as she read the words. In that moment, she realized that the scandal had changed. More than just her career, it had changed her perspective. Before, she had viewed criticism as something to fear, a threat to her reputation and credibility. Now she saw it as an opportunity to grow, to prove that she was stronger than any challenge thrown her way. And while she wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, she couldn't deny that it had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, humility, and the power of staying true to oneself. As weeks turned into months, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The headlines about the scandal faded, replaced by coverage of Jasmine's policy initiatives and grassroots efforts. People started referring to her not as the politician embroiled in controversy, but as the leader who had weathered a storm and emerged stronger. Her approval ratings climbed steadily, fueled by a newfound respect for her ability to navigate adversity with grace and determination. But Jasmine didn't let success go to her head. If anything, the experience had humbled her. She understood now more than ever that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about being authentic. It was about owning your mistakes, learning from them, and using those lessons to become better. She vowed never to lose sight of that principle, no matter where her journey took her next. In late spring, Jasmine decided to host another town hall, this time focused solely on the future. She invited experts, activists, and everyday citizens to join her in brainstorming solutions to pressing issues facing her district. Education, healthcare, affordable housing, nothing was off the table. The event drew a diverse crowd, united by a shared desire to create positive change. As Jasmine stood at the front of the room, listening to passionate voices share their hopes and dreams, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. This was why she had entered politics, to bring people together and give them a platform to shape their own destinies. By the end of the night, Jasmine left the venue with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew there would always be obstacles ahead, moments when doubt crept in or critics tried to tear her down. But she also knew she had the tools to overcome them: resilience, authenticity, and an unshakable belief in the power of community. And as she drove home under a sky dotted with stars, she smiled, knowing that whatever came next, she was ready. This chapter of her life had tested her in ways she never imagined, but it had also revealed her strength. It had shown her that even in the darkest storms there is light, if you're willing to look for it. And Jasmine Crockett? She was done hiding. She was ready to step fully into the role she had always dreamed of playing, a leader who inspired others, not because she was flawless, but because she was real. As summer rolled in, Jasmine found herself reflecting on how far she had come since that fateful day on live television. The scandal wasn't just a chapter in her life anymore, it was a turning point, one that had reshaped not only her career, but also her understanding of what it meant to lead. She realized leadership wasn't about standing above others or pretending to have all the answers. It was about rolling up your sleeves, listening deeply, and working alongside people to solve problems together. This newfound clarity fueled her determination to keep pushing forward, even when challenges arose. One of those challenges came sooner than expected. A major policy proposal she had been championing, a plan to increase funding for underserved schools, hit a roadblock in committee. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle criticized the bill, claiming it was too ambitious or poorly thought out. Some accused her of using the initiative as a way to distract from the lingering whispers about her past controversies. The criticism stung, but Jasmine refused to let it derail her efforts. She knew this issue mattered, not because it would boost her image, but because it could change lives. Determined to save the proposal, Jasmine decided to take an unconventional approach. Instead of relying solely on closed-door negotiations, she organized a series of roundtable discussions with teachers, parents, students, and education advocates. These weren't formal hearings filled with scripted testimonies. They were raw, open conversations where participants could share their experiences without fear of judgment. Each meeting revealed new insights, stories of overcrowded classrooms, outdated textbooks, and passionate educators doing everything they could with limited resources. Hearing these firsthand accounts reignited Jasmine's passion for the cause and reminded her why she couldn't afford to give up. Armed with fresh perspectives and renewed resolve, Jasmine went back to work. She rewrote sections of the proposal based on feedback from the roundtables, making sure it addressed real needs rather than hypothetical scenarios. Then she took another bold step. She invited key lawmakers to visit schools in her district. They toured classrooms packed with eager students, met teachers struggling to make ends meet, and saw for themselves the impact of chronic underfunding. For many of them, it was an eye-opening experience, one that softened their resistance and opened the door to compromise. Slowly but surely, support for the bill began to grow. Legislators who had initially dismissed it started speaking out in favor of increased funding. Community groups rallied behind Jasmine, organizing petitions and awareness campaigns to keep the momentum going. By the time the proposal reached the floor for a vote, it had transformed from a divisive piece of legislation into a symbol of hope and collaboration. When the final tally came in, passing by a narrow margin, Jasmine felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It wasn't just a victory for her. It was a win for everyone who had fought so hard to make their voices heard. The success of the education bill marked a turning point in Jasmine's political career. People began to see her less as someone embroiled in drama, and more as a leader, capable of delivering results. Her ability to navigate adversity while staying focused on her goals earned her respect across party lines. Even former critics admitted, sometimes reluctantly, that she had proven herself to be a force to be reckoned with. But Jasmine didn't rest on her laurels. If anything, the win inspired her to tackle even bigger challenges. She turned her attention to healthcare reform, specifically addressing disparities in access to affordable care. This was a contentious topic, fraught with complexities and competing interests. Many warned her against diving into such a polarizing issue, fearing it might reignite old controversies. But Jasmine saw it differently. "If we only focus on safe topics," she told her team during a strategy meeting, "we'll never make meaningful progress. Sometimes you have to take risks if you want to create real change. Her approach mirrored what she had done with the education bill. She listened first. Over the course of several months, Jasmine traveled across her district, holding town halls and private meetings with doctors, nurses, patients, and community leaders. She heard heartbreaking stories of families forced to choose between paying medical bills and putting food on the table. She met single mothers working multiple jobs just to afford prescriptions for their children, and she witnessed the resilience of healthcare workers stretched thin by systemic failures. These interactions shaped every aspect of her proposed reforms. Rather than presenting a top-down solution, she worked closely with stakeholders to craft policies tailored to the specific needs of her constituents. Transparency became her guiding principle. Every draft of the proposal was shared publicly, inviting feedback and suggestions. Critics accused her of being too inclusive, arguing that consensus building slowed down the process. But Jasmine stood firm. "Good policy takes time," she said during a press conference. "If we rush it, we risk leaving people behind, and that's something I refuse to do." The journey wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, times when it felt like the odds were stacked against her. Lobbyists pushed back fiercely, pouring money into campaigns designed to discredit her ideas. Opponents launched smear ads questioning her motives and painting her proposals as unrealistic. Through it all, Jasmine stayed calm, refusing to engage in mudslinging or fear-mongering. Instead, she doubled down on grassroots organizing, empowering everyday citizens to advocate for themselves. Her perseverance paid off. As public support for her healthcare reforms grew, so did pressure on lawmakers to act. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, demanding action. Social media buzzed, with hashtags supporting her initiatives. Even some of her fiercest opponents softened their stance, recognizing that opposing popular measures might cost them politically. When the final vote came, the reforms passed with bipartisan backing, a rare feat in today's hyper-partisan climate. Jasmine celebrated the victory quietly, surrounded by her team and closest supporters. While others toasted her success, she remained reflective. She knew better than anyone that passing laws was only half the battle. Implementation would be messy, requiring constant vigilance to ensure promises translated into tangible improvements. Still, she allowed herself a moment of pride. After everything she had endured, the accusations, the scrutiny, the relentless attacks, she had managed to turn pain into purpose. That realization filled her with gratitude. That night, as she sat alone in her office reviewing notes for upcoming projects, Jasmine thought about the lessons she had learned along the way. Adversity had taught her patience, humility, and the importance of leaning on others when times got tough. It had shown her that true strength lies not in avoiding failure but in embracing it as a stepping stone to growth. Most importantly, it had reinforced her belief in the power of connection, of seeing people not as statistics or talking points but as human beings deserving of dignity and respect. Looking ahead, Jasmine knew there would always be obstacles. Politics was messy, unpredictable, and often thankless. But she also knew she had built something invaluable. Trust. Not just from voters, but from colleagues and allies who now saw her as someone willing to roll up her sleeves and get things done. That trust gave her confidence to dream bigger, to imagine a future where collaboration triumphed over division and progress outweighed partisanship. As she turned off the lights and headed home, Jasmine smiled to herself. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. She had faced storms before and emerged stronger each time. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on, with courage, authenticity, and an unwavering commitment to serving others. Because at the end of the day, that's what leadership was all about: showing up, staying steady, and never losing sight of the people you were fighting for. As fall approached, Jasmine found herself at a crossroads. The victories she had achieved, the education funding bill, the healthcare reforms, had solidified her reputation as a leader who got things done. But with success came new challenges. Her growing influence attracted attention from national political figures, many of whom began courting her for endorsements or partnerships. Some even hinted at bigger opportunities, a run for higher office perhaps, or a leadership role within her party. It was flattering, sure, but it also left her feeling uneasy. Jasmine had always been driven by a desire to serve her community, not climb some invisible ladder of power. She worried that pursuing higher ambitions might pull her away from the people she cared about most. Would she still be able to stay grounded if she stepped onto a larger stage? Could she maintain the same level of connection and authenticity while navigating the complexities of national politics? These questions weighed heavily on her mind. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Jasmine decided to take a walk through her neighborhood. It was something she did often when she needed clarity. The streets were quiet, lit softly by the golden glow of streetlights. As she strolled past familiar houses, she noticed an elderly woman sitting on her porch, knitting in hand. They exchanged warm smiles, and the woman waved her over. "Evening, Congresswoman," the woman said, her voice gentle but firm. "Haven't seen you around here much lately." Jasmine chuckled, slightly embarrassed. "You're right. I've been caught up in work. Guess I haven't been home enough." The woman nodded knowingly. "We see you on TV sometimes. You're doing good things, but don't forget where you come from. We need you here too." Her words struck a chord. Jasmine thanked her and continued walking, but the conversation lingered in her mind. It wasn't just one person's opinion. It was a reminder of why she had started this journey in the first place. Her roots mattered. Her community mattered. No matter how far she went, she couldn't lose sight of that. Determined to strike a balance, Jasmine made a conscious effort to reconnect with her district. She scaled back on out-of-town commitments and spent more time attending local events, visiting schools and hosting informal meetups at coffee shops and parks. People appreciated her presence not because they expected anything from her, but because it showed she cared. Conversations flowed naturally, about jobs, housing, family struggles, and Jasmine soaked it all in, letting their stories guide her next steps. Around the same time, a new issue began bubbling up in her district: environmental justice. Residents living near industrial zones reported high rates of asthma and other health problems linked to pollution. Activists argued that these communities, many of which were low-income and predominantly minority populations, had been ignored for far too long. When Jasmine attended a rally organized by local groups, she was struck by the passion and urgency in their voices. One young girl, no older than 10, stood up to speak. Her speech was short, but powerful. "My little brother can't play outside without coughing. He deserves clean air like everyone else." That moment stayed with Jasmine. She knew she couldn't tackle climate change alone, but she could amplify the voices of those fighting for justice. She partnered with activists, scientists, and policy experts to draft legislation aimed at holding polluters accountable and investing in green infrastructure. It was ambitious, yes, but so was every battle worth fighting. Predictably, resistance came swiftly. Corporations lobbied hard against the proposals, warning of economic consequences and job losses. Critics accused Jasmine of pandering to radical environmentalists or ignoring practical realities. But instead of backing down, she leaned into the controversy. She invited skeptics to join her on tours of affected neighborhoods, hoping first-hand exposure would soften their stance. To her surprise, some actually changed their minds. Seeing the human cost of inaction made it harder to dismiss the problem as abstract or exaggerated. Meanwhile, Jasmine faced another unexpected challenge: burnout. Balancing the demands of her job with her personal life was becoming increasingly difficult. There were days when she felt stretched thin, juggling committee hearings, constituent meetings, and late-night strategy sessions. Her team urged her to delegate more, but delegating wasn't easy for someone used to handling everything herself. One particularly grueling week, Jasmine finally hit her limit. After collapsing from exhaustion during a town hall, she realized she couldn't keep going at this pace. Reluctantly, she agreed to take a short break, a rarity for someone as driven as her. During that time, she focused on self-care, spending time with loved ones, reading books unrelated to politics, and simply resting. It wasn't easy. Part of her felt guilty for stepping away, even briefly. But when she returned to work refreshed and recharged, She understood the importance of taking care of herself, not just for her own sake, but for the sake of those counting on her. By winter, Jasmine's environmental justice bill gained traction, thanks in large part to grassroots support. Thousands of residents signed petitions, attended rallies, and called their representatives demanding action. Even opponents acknowledged the groundswell of public pressure, forcing them to reconsider their positions. When the vote finally came, the bill passed narrowly, but decisively, marking another milestone in Jasmine's career. Celebrating privately with her team, Jasmine reflected on the year behind her. She had faced countless obstacles, both personal and professional, yet somehow managed to push through. Each victory had been hard-fought, each lesson learned the hard way. But she wouldn't trade any of it. Not the scandals, not the sleepless nights, not the moments of doubt, because every challenge had shaped her into the leader she was today. As snow began to fall outside her window, Jasmine sat quietly, sipping tea and thinking about the future. She didn't know what lay ahead, whether she'd run for higher office, continue serving her district, or pursue something entirely different. What she did know was this: she was ready to face whatever storms came her way, ready to listen and learn, and ready to fight for the people who believed in her. In that moment, Jasmine felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead might be uncertain, but she trusted herself to navigate it. After all, she had already proven that resilience wasn't about avoiding adversity. It was about finding strength in the midst of it. And with that knowledge, she smiled, knowing she could handle anything life threw her way. By spring, Jasmine found herself standing on a stage she never imagined she'd reach. The past year had been a whirlwind of challenges, triumphs, and lessons that reshaped not only her career, but also her understanding of leadership. Now, as she prepared to deliver a keynote speech at a national conference, she felt a mix of excitement and gratitude. This wasn't just another event. It was an opportunity to share her journey with thousands of people who looked up to her for inspiration. The auditorium buzzed with energy as attendees filed in, eager to hear what she had to say. Many of them were young activists, community organizers, and aspiring politicians hoping to make their mark on the world. For Jasmine, this moment was deeply personal. She remembered being in their shoes years ago, uncertain, idealistic, and hungry for change. Back then, she often wondered if one person could truly make a difference. Today, she stood as living proof that it was possible. As she stepped up to the podium, the room fell silent. The spotlight hit her face, warm and bright, but instead of feeling intimidated, she felt grounded. She took a deep breath, smiled, and began speaking, not as a politician, but as someone who had faced doubt, failure, and fear head-on. "I want to start by telling you something I rarely admit," she said, pausing to let her words sink in. "There have been moments in my life when I didn't think I could keep going. Moments when the weight of everything felt too heavy to carry. And yet, here I am, standing before you, stronger than ever." Her honesty resonated immediately. People leaned forward in their seats, hanging on to every word. Jasmine went on to recount her journey, the scandals, the accusations, the late nights spent questioning whether she was cut out for this work. She spoke openly about the mistakes she had made along the way, emphasizing that growth comes not from avoiding failure but from learning how to rise after falling. "Let me tell you something," she continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Adversity doesn't define you. It reveals you. It shows you who you are when no one is watching, when the cameras are off, and when the only person you have to answer to is yourself. When I look back on everything I've been through, I see resilience, I see strength, but most importantly, I see humanity." She paused again, scanning the crowd. Faces stared back at her, some nodding in agreement, others wiping away tears. Jasmine knew she wasn't just talking to these individuals. She was speaking directly to their struggles, their dreams, and their fears. She wanted them to know they weren't alone. "Too often we're told that success means having all the answers," she said. "But let me tell you a secret. Nobody has all the answers. Not me, not anyone. What sets us apart isn't perfection. It's persistence. It's showing up, even when you're scared. It's listening when you'd rather shout. It's choosing empathy over anger, collaboration over division. The audience erupted in applause, but Jasmine wasn't done yet. She shifted gears, focusing on the importance of staying connected to the communities they served. Never forget where you come from, she urged. No matter how far you go, your roots will always remind you why you started this journey. Listen to the people around you, the teachers, the parents, the workers, the dreamers. Their stories will guide you. Her final message was one of hope and action. Change doesn't happen overnight, she said. It happens step by step, day by day. Sometimes it feels like you're moving mountains with a teaspoon, but trust me, those teaspoons add up. So don't give up. Keep pushing. Keep believing. Because the world needs leaders like you. Leaders who care, who listen, and who refuse to settle for less than justice and equality for everyone. When she finished speaking, the room erupted into a standing ovation. People cheered, clapped, and whistled, their enthusiasm echoing off the walls. For Jasmine, it was more than just validation. It was confirmation that her story mattered. That her struggles, her victories, and her lessons could inspire others to keep fighting for what they believed in. After the speech, dozens of attendees lined up to meet her. Some thanked her for her words, saying they came at just the right time. Others shared their own stories of hardship and perseverance, seeking advice or simply wanting to connect. Jasmine listened to each one, offering encouragement and reminding them that they weren't alone. By the end of the night, her voice was hoarse, but her heart was full. Over the following weeks, Jasmine noticed a shift, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. Speaking at the conference had reignited her passion for advocacy and reminded her why she had entered public service in the first place. She realized that while titles and accolades were nice, true fulfillment came from making a difference in people's lives. Whether it was passing legislation, mentoring young leaders, or simply lending an ear to someone in need, every act of kindness mattered. Jasmine returned to her district with renewed purpose. She threw herself into new projects, collaborating with local organizations to address issues ranging from affordable housing to mental health resources. At the same time, she remained mindful of her limits, prioritizing self-care and leaning on her support system when needed. She understood now that sustainability was key. If she burned out, she wouldn't be able to help anyone. One afternoon, as she walked through a park near her home, Jasmine spotted a group of kids playing soccer. They laughed and shouted, completely absorbed in the game. Watching them brought a smile to her face. In that moment, she thought about all the children she had met during her travels. Kids dreaming of brighter futures, kids determined to overcome obstacles, kids just trying to catch a break. She felt a surge of gratitude knowing that her work, in some small way, might help pave the path for them. Later that evening, sitting on her porch with a cup of tea, Jasmine reflected on how far she had come. From the scandal that nearly derailed her career to the victories that restored her faith in herself, every experience had shaped her into the leader she was today. She knew there would always be challenges ahead. Politics was unpredictable, after all, but she faced them with confidence. She had proven time and again that she could weather storms and emerge stronger. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jasmine felt a profound sense of peace. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but she trusted in her ability to navigate it. Whatever curveballs life threw her way, she was ready to face them head-on, with courage, authenticity, and an unwavering commitment to serving others. And so as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Jasmine smiled to herself. The road ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear: she was exactly where she was meant to be.